Who Killed Garrett Phillips is a recent HBO documentary from Liz Garbus about the unsolved murder of a 12-year-old boy in upstate New York and the accusation and trial of the ex-boyfriend of Garrett's mother for the crime. I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and Liz Garbus joins us today. And Liz, the first thing I want to ask you is, did the Potsdam Police Department only have eyes on Hillary, or did they ever consider any other suspects in this case?
Thanks for asking. The Potsdam PD did have a list of other names. There was John Jones, who was another ex-boyfriend of Tandy's, the mother of Garrett Phillips, who was killed. They did make a list, and it said some kids. We were able to retrieve notes that pointed to other victims. But in terms of exhaustive investigation, we really only saw evidence of such an investigation against Nick Hillary, the ex-boyfriend who happened to be Jamaican American, a target for some time of the deputy sheriff, John Jones, who was a spurned lover as well.
So how did you find out about this case? Because this is just the crime alone is just horrific in nature, but when did you become familiar with this case, and what was going on with the accusation against Nick Hillary?
So I first learned about this case through reading an article in the New York Times, but there had been a lot before that. Local news, the murder took place in the town of Potsdam, which is in the North Country of New York State. It's just south of the Canadian border. It is rural farm country, very, very far away from major airports. There's a quiet to life there that I think people seek out and enjoy. It's also an overwhelmingly white county, and Nick Hillary, but it's also home to three or more very big and bustling universities. Nick Hillary was recruited to teach soccer because he was at the collegiate level an all-star, an all-American leading soccer player in the country with many titles and rings and whatever the right things are for being a soccer star. So he lived up there coaching collegiate soccer. Local news, that's the seat of the county. There was a reporter there who was really quite doggedly sort of following this case and trying to understand what evidence did the county have against this man. It seemed that they had a lot of stories and interest in him, but really couldn't kind of nail what the evidence was. And then other local news organizations picked it up, the NCPR, the NPR station up there, and then it trickled out to the New York Times, and that's when I got a wind of it. I guess I give you the backstory to show how important local news coverage is as it's a dying breed, because the New York Times would have never gotten wind of this story had these local journalists not been covering it, and that would have made a difference. It not being covered and it not reaching the New York Times would have made a real detriment to justice. So that's where I read about it, and I ended up, after that story, I just thought this is an interesting story. It's saying so much about race, policing, and the ways in which a prosecutor can really operate without much oversight. And I thought it was an important story to look into.
So the one thing that I didn't hear that much about from the prosecution in the film was Nick Hillary's motive. I mean, I heard them say that I heard the lead attorney during the trial, I think once, talk about how he was blinded by I can't even remember, but he was driven mad by jealousy to get his ex-girlfriend back, and it didn't really feel like there was really that much there in motive. Did they ever address that, or was it never really addressed at the trial?
No, the motive that they posited was fairly simple. Nick and Garrett, Nick being the boyfriend of Tandy, Garrett being Tandy's son, didn't really get along. They said Nick was hard on him, didn't let him watch as much TV as he wanted to, was strict about his homework. He was someone who was getting involved in the parenting in a supervisory way. So there was conflict there, and they posited that Nick had to get rid of Garrett in order to get Tandy back. It's pretty ludicrous on its face. You killing a child so that a mother will take you back after you've been broken up for months and months. Ooh, sorry, my Siri is talking to me right now. Okay, sorry about that. Eliminating a child of a lover, thinking that she might take you back at that point feels like a real stretch for a person who has acted quite rationally all his life. And just for the people who are seeing this, the story is basically that Garrett Phillips skateboards home on an afternoon after school, and goes up to his apartment, and a couple minutes later, his neighbors hear sounds. They call the police. The police arrive, stand outside the door for godforsaken 20-some minutes. And finally, when they get the landlord to open the door, walk in the apartment to find Garrett non-responsive. And the only real clue was a broken window frame that the perpetrator must have jumped out of. Now, the prints on that window frame did not match Nick Hillary. The shoe prints outside did not match Nick Hillary. But what they felt was their smoking gun was the fact that at the high school parking lot, after Garrett scoots by, soon after that, Nick Hillary's car pulls out. And Nick Hillary said in an interview, when asked where did he go when he left the parking lot, he said home. And they said, isn't your home to the right? Nick Hillary says, yes. And they said, but you made a left turn. And Nick Hillary says, oh, okay, well, maybe I took another route home. But it really came down to this right turn versus left turn. And the fact that Nick misremembered or lied, even if you want to give him no benefit of the doubt about which way he turned on a street, cannot put you in prison for life for murder. You really have to have more than that. But that was really what they went to town with as their smoking gun.
So, there must have been a lot of things, because you were making this documentary during the process of the trial. And what was the most shocking thing that you discovered about this case and trial over the course of filming the documentary?
Oh, wow. There were so many shocking things. This case was filled with so many twists and turns. It was one of the most kind of amazing moments was when Nick Hillary himself chose a bench trial rather than a jury trial. All of his lawyers were advising him against it. They said, with 12 jurors, all you need is one to say, I don't think he did it. So that's less than 10% you have to convince, right? But with one judge, you have to convince 100% of that one judge. And so defense attorneys, steer clients away from bench trials. But Nick knew that somebody who was looking at the law and had a lot of years experience being cautious about letting emotion come into legal decisions, which a judge would have, felt that he would get a more fair trial by judge. And it was a really fraught day. His lawyers felt like, we just lost. This man is going to prison. He chose trial by judge. It's over. And Nick insisted, and it is his decision. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but it was an amazing day. And I never had explored, I've been making films in the criminal justice system. I had never seen that particular decision go down, and it was fascinating.
So in addition to this film, you also just recently, correct me if I'm wrong, you just released your first feature narrative called Lost Girls, which stars Amy Ryan and Thomasin McKenzie. Was making a narrative film something you had always aspired to, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, I made Lost Girls, which was released this past March, actually March 13th, the same day that New York City went on lockdown. Yeah, I mean, Lost Girls is based on a true story. I had made short narrative films when I was studying film back when I was a student, but had spent, the rest of my career making documentaries. And I had been, I had some projects that I had been carrying around and hoping to do. And when I got the script for Lost Girls, I just felt like, okay, now is the time. I'm going to stop making docs. I'm going to, focus my energy on mounting this project. And as people listening to this probably know, it takes an extraordinary amount of time to get a scripted feature off the ground and to be made. But I was so passionate by Mary Gilbert's story. She was the mother of a young woman who went missing, and her fight for justice ended up revealing a slew of murders, a serial murder of young women who worked as escorts out in Long Island. So the experience was very different. There are some similarities to documentary filming, and there are a lot of differences. But it was wonderful to work on that scale with all the toys you have, the amount of control you have of the frame and of the moment. But at the end of the day, it's storytelling. And for me, the edit room is where we make stories in docs in many ways. And, that was true to some extent as well in the narrative scripted process as well.
And to touch on another thing that you have coming up, you also have another documentary coming up soon on HBO, a multi-part documentary coming out next month in June. On Michelle McNamara's search for the Golden State Killer. Could you give us a little preview of what we can expect with that?
Oh, well, I'm really excited for that series to launch at the end of June. I'll Be Gone in the Dark is a 6-part series based on Michelle McNamara's book. And what was really extraordinary was working with Patton. He just handed over Michelle's hard drives, all of her recordings of her interviews with victims and investigators. And so what we were really able to do was make Michelle feel extremely present, as if you're going on this journey with her to investigate this terrible series of crimes. And the film, is in the same way that the book is not a book about a serial killer. It's about a woman grappling with this and trying to get to the bottom in her own process and obsession. The doc series really is that as well. It's really about Michelle at the center of this story, her empathy for the victims, their stories, and of course there's a serial killer there, but it is not about the serial killer. It's really about that obsession and the human beings who populate this story. I'm really excited for that to come out on HBO at the end of June.
Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best throughout this Emmy season. And to our viewers, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for all our latest content. And don't forget to go to goldderby.com and use the Gold Derby app to make your predictions and see if you can outsmart the top prognosticators in Hollywood. Thanks so much, Liz.
Thank you.